Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here with a bit of an interesting video. So, a lot of people have been putting up battles and now reviews and various other aspects, but during my live stream someone asked me to go over all of the faction and lord traits for the various factions in the campaign, and we realized that a lot of them have changed. Pretty much all of them are buffs. So I figured, just for today, or this morning's video, that I would go ahead and boot up Mortal Empires and go over all of them with you guys. That way you could look out for your favorite faction, see if they've been improved compared to the prior build, and yeah, just be able to talk about it in the comments or whatever you want to do. That being said, before we go into this, keep in mind that this is not necessarily the final build. There may still be some changes before the 8th, which is in 2 days. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it.
I am Tyrion.
So starting with Tyrion, he definitely got some changes. So and a lot of the changes that we're going to be going over, the big thing that happened was that a lot of the lords have had their lord effects moved into faction effects, which make them a lot more dramatic and important. And also, then they've gotten maybe a couple of new lord effects. So for Tyrion, or Lothern, we have plus 20 diplomatic relations with all high elves, minus 50% construction time for the Shrine of Cain, and minus 1 recruitment duration for infantry and cavalry. And remember, that's faction wide. So no matter which lord you're using and where they are, so long as you started with Lothern, then you get to recruit all cav and infantry one turn shorter than you normally would have. For his personal effects, he gets minus 50% upkeep for all spearmen, archers, and silverhelm units. And then he also gets plus 3 recruitment rank for all Lothern Seaguard units. So he kind of has more of a not super elite function. I mean, the recruitment duration really helps with getting things like Dragon Princes and Silverhelms and stuff by having them, I believe, only down to a 1-turn recruitment. Dragon Princes maybe 3 normally, so that would take them down to 2. But this lower upkeep and higher recruitment rank really helps in his early game by giving you a reliable source of cheap but effective units.
We can achieve much together.
Techless, for faction effects, the Order of Loremasters gets plus 10 diplomatic relations with all humans and high elves, which is great, especially because he's kind of surrounded at the moment. He also gets plus 5 recruitment rank for mages, faction wide, so it doesn't have to be where he is, it can be anywhere. Then for his personal lord effects, he gets plus 30 to his Winds of Magic, Power Reserve, and he starts off with Fireball, which if you go through his skill tree, you can eventually upgrade to the Wind spell. Ilario, I don't believe has changed. So she gets bonus when she gets stronger the more of Ulthuan she controls, but she obviously gets penalized the less of it she controls. Plus 2 hero capacity for handmaidens, minus 75% right cost for the invocation of Aisha. Anywhere she wanders through, as long as it's a region she controls, she leaves a bonus, but she grows weaker as chaos grows stronger throughout the world. And then in her personal army, she gets plus 15% missile damage for the Sisters of Avalorn and handmaidens.
Serve the Shadow King.
Elithanar has, for his faction, suitable climate is wasteland. He has the Mark for Death. Global recruitment duration is minus 1 for all units, but so that's only for global recruitment, but that's for all armies. And then he has plus 10% campaign movement for all armies. Pretty fantastic. And then for his lord effects, he has plus 25% chance to ambush and minus 50% upkeep for the Shadow Walkers. Lord Mazdamundi has minus 10 diplomatic relations with most factions, very few exceptions. He also has, but he has minus 50 construction costs for Star Chamber buildings, allowing him to get more Slawn quickly. Minus 30% cost for all rights, and he starts off with a plus 1 capacity for Slawn Mage Priests. And then for his personal lord effect, he has a 50% upkeep reduction for Temple Guard. Kroq-Gar. So for Kroq-Gar's faction, he has minus 10 10% upkeep for all units. So that means every single general Kroq-Gar has minus 10% upkeep. And then for his personal army, his entire army has plus 10 leadership. He has minus 50% upkeep for Saurus and Cold Ones. And then for Stegodons, Bastiladons, Pterodons, and Carnosaurs, he gives them plus an additional 10 leadership and plus 20 armor. And he also has a plus 25% chance for ambush.
Ulthuan will be mine.
Malekith still gives some of his XP to all other lords, which encourages you, of course, to be running a larger amount of armies than normal. He gets plus 30 diplomatic relations with the Cult of Pleasure specifically. If lords get a higher rank than Malekith, they're more likely to have their loyalty go down. And he gets plus 2 loyalty for all newly hired lords. And that's faction-wide. And then for his personal upkeep, or his personal effects, he gets minus 50% upkeep for Blackguard, Dread Spears, Bleak Swords, and Dark Shards.
Ulthuan will yield.
Morathi has minus 40 diplomatic relations with the Exiles of the Heck, which I believe is new. Plus 20 relations, however, with all Dark Elves. Minus 25% cost for sorcery-related buildings, and minus 50% cost for all hero actions. And all characters in her army also get released plus 1 corruption automatically. And then all heroes have minus 50% upkeep. I believe the hero action cost and the hero upkeep being halved for all armies and all lords is new. And then her only lord effect is that if there is another lord in the same region as her, they have a chance to gain 2 loyalty. So if you're having problem lords, you want to keep them close to Morathi.
We will drown this world.
Crone Hellebron, so she can still sacrifice slaves to trigger Death Knight. Death Knight still spawns a unique army that gives you money, but if you don't do it fast enough, you start to take penalties. She has plus 2 recruitment, or capacity rather, for Death Hags, and she has a plus 25% bonus to capturing casualties post-battle. And then for her upkeep, or for her personal effects, she has half or minus 50% upkeep for Witch Elves, Sisters of Slaughter, and Harken Executioners. Pretty solid.
Only I dare.
For the Blessed Dread of Lokir Felhart, he has the suitable climate of savanna and jungle. His income from slave pens and slave markets is increased by 50%, so he can make a ton of money. Every single major port on the map for him can spawn Black Arcs, and he also does not have the Black Arc right, because he doesn't need it to make Black Arcs. He has it replaced with the right of Anathrema, I believe, which has various buffs. And then for his personal effect, his Lord effect, he has a minus 50% upkeep for all Black Arc Corsairs, which is pretty fantastic if you're wanting to play a more thematic army with him. He does have some pretty nice buffs for them. But being able to recruit a ton of Black Arcs is super nice, because Black Arcs are quite powerful now, and come with an array of buffs within their area of effect, including capturing post-battle casualties, increasing how much money you make from raiding and sacking, and also how much money you make from slave structures, which can be really, really nice.
No one controls Warlord Queen.
So Queek Headtaker is obviously the opposite of Malekith. He steals a percentage of XP earned by all other lords, and if you take Grayseer recruits, they start off with 2 less loyalty. However, he has the following lord effects. He gets his entire army gets plus 10 melee attack and plus 10% weapon strength when fighting against any dwarves or greenskin tribes. He also has minus 50% upkeep for storm vermin and clan rats. And then he gets plus 2 uses of the Menace Below at all times for his personal army. So, being Queek, he's obviously very greedy and is able to sort of funnel all of his own stuff. I don't know how Queek is very hard when Teclis is only hard.
Loremaster
I
of
think they need to
poets.
update Teclis's to be very hard. Lord Skrolk, he has minus 50% construction cost faction-wide for all of the Clan Pestilence buildings. He also has minus 75% right cause for the Pestilent Scheme. And then for his personal army, he has minus 50% upkeep for Plague Monks, Censer Bearers, Plague Claw Catapults, and Plague Priests, but only in his army. And then he additionally causes an additional +3 Scathing Corruption in any province he's located.
Many schemes, soon Rictus mine.
Clan Rictus has suitable climate of frozen, but jungle climate counts as unpleasant for him. He still has his +4 public order whenever you break a diplomatic treaty, encouraging you to be a backstabber. And then he gets +13 melee attack for his entire army during ambushes, and he gets +13 melee attack after retreating when attacked for his entire army, which I believe is different. I think it used to be he just got buffs whenever he would retreat and then fight, but now it looks like he gets buffs whenever he ambushes or fights after retreating, which is pretty awesome. And then all army units in his army have the Vanguard trait.
The Vampire Coast is all
Luther Harken has minus 30 diplomatic relations with all Lizardman factions, which obviously doesn't help, but his entire faction gets +8 leadership when fighting against the Lizardmen. So he is really specialized faction-wide with going after the Lizardmen regardless of what lord it is. Also, I like that he breaks the fourth wall and shoots you in the face. For his personal lord effects, he has different personalities that take over that give him various buffs and debuffs and also give him access, I believe, to a random spell. He gives +25% magic resistance to all units in his army, and he causes an additional +3 vampiric corruption to whatever province he is standing in.
Tides of death.
Count Noctilus. He has +2 recruitment capacity for pirate crew. This essentially means that whenever he's recruiting from, whenever you're recruiting from a horde ship, so for him or any of the legendary lords, they have an additional +2 to get new armies. It might also affect regular armies as well. I'm not 100% sure. I have to test that. Faction-wide, though, he has a -1 to the turns needed to recruit Necrofix Colossi, which is fantastic. I believe they take 3 turns, so for him only needing 2 is really, really nice. And then, of course, he gains war declaration missions with unique rewards. So basically, the Dreadfleet has this really neat mechanic where you'll get special missions that they don't look special, but when you look at the rewards, you'll realize they're special. It'll be something like, raid this faction that we don't like, and if you do so, you will gain +100% campaign movement. Or it might be attack or be at war with this faction by this many turns, and if you do, you'll gain plus some amount to recruitment rank for all new units and stuff like that. So basically he gets very, very powerful bonuses for doing certain war-related missions. And then for his personal army, he has -20% upkeep for all Necrofix Colossi and gives +15% weapon strength to all large units. So he is really designed for the monster mash.
Blood, salt, and plunder!
So Arnis Assault Spite, her faction effects is that they have a 25% increased chance to find treasure maps. They get +50% additional income from raiding and +20% additional income from sacking. So she's easily the best of the Vampire Coast factions when it comes to having multiple lords who just sort of run around harassing, sacking minor settlements, and just raiding and being a general nuisance. The Pirates of Sartosa, of course, the best at being pirates. For her personal effects, she has +12 to her leadership effect. So long as she's standing near your units, they are much more likely to hold. And then she gets +20% weapon strength and +8 melee attack to all Sartosan units in her personal army. So contrary to the way some people might believe, you can actually run Sartosans with her all the way into her late game, and they're actually pretty effective units. I do hope they will re-add in the Great Weapon variant, as I think that variant was actually the most useful, though I certainly understand a lot of people didn't think they looked piratey enough. Hopefully that can just be fixed and they can be re-added, because they were definitely a fantastic, great in-game unit.
Madam Captain, Silostra Delphin.
As she says, Silostra Delphin has some pretty interesting faction effects. So faction-wide, she gets +2 loyalty for new recruits, but she gets minus 20% upkeep and minus 20% recruitment cost for Mourngulls and Sirens, or Sirenes. I call them Sirens because that's what it's supposed to be. Faction-wide, instead of just her Lord version. So that's really interesting, and it encourages you to take these sort of ghostly spectral units across your entire faction, which is awesome. For her personal army effects, she gives plus 5% physical resistance to all units in her army and gives them all magical attacks, which is a pretty nasty combo. So she sort of makes everyone in her army a little bit ethereal, which is really cool. But the really nice thing is knocking up the ethereal units she does have up to a whopping 80% physical resistance.
All bow before the imperishable.
So Cetra the Imperishable, faction-wide, has plus 2 public order to all provinces, plus 10 growth to all provinces, and all capital settlements in every province have minus 1 construction time for all buildings. Which is pretty amazing. Well, that could be provincial capital / settlement buildings. So that could mean just the settlement building itself, which is just the core structure, or it could mean all buildings. Seeing as it doesn't say down to a minimum of 1, I'm assuming it's only the core settlement building, but that's still a really powerful buff considering it goes across your entire map. Then for his personal lord effects, he has plus 100% to his leadership aura size, which is great, and his casualty replenishment rate for Tomb Guard and Skeleton Chariot units is increased by 10%.
Join with us, exiles.
So Grand Hierophant Katep counts mountains as suitable climate. He generates 2 canopic jars per turn automatically. He has minus 40 diplomatic relation with all Dark Elves. He has plus 5 campaign movement to all armies and plus 10% casualty replenishment rate for all armies. Then for his personal self, wherever he is, he has plus 2 capacity for Lich Priest, and then in the province that he is local to, he has plus 3 recruitment rank for Lich Priest.
All vampires shall pay.
The Court of Liberas has High Queen Khalida, who counts jungle as suitable climate. She has plus 20 diplomatic relations with all other Tomb Kings, gives plus 20% ammunition to all of her armies, which is fantastic. And then for her Lord effects, she suffers only half casualties suffered from all forms of attrition, gains plus 3 untainted to whatever province she's standing in, and of course gives poisoned attacks to all units in her army.
I am the Lich King.
So Archon the Black has the ability to recruit vampire count units faction-wide. He has minus 50 relations with all Tomb Kings, which I believe is the most significant one I've seen so far. If you add Archon and the Cult of Pleasures together, I believe it comes up to 60. But the followers of Nagash have the worst one outright. However, he does compensate with a plus 20 diplomatic relation with the vampire counts. He also has, I believe that also includes the Vampire Coast, I'm not sure. I was playing a Count Noctilus campaign, and Count Noctilus had a plus 20 relationship with Archon the Black. So it could have been it was just Noctilus, but I think it's all the Vampire Coast factions. He also gets plus 10 to the power reserve for all winds of magic for all armies. And of course, his entire faction ignores public order penalties caused by vampiric corruption. For his personal lord effects, he simply gives plus 5 melee attack and melee defense to all embedded heroes.
Summon the
So
Electra Counts.
now we're getting into the really meaty stuff. A lot of the Game 1 lords have had substantial changes to their Mortal Empire starting effects. So Karl Franz has plus 10 diplomatic relations with all Imperial provinces, plus 2 recruitment rank for all new lords, plus 10% campaign movement to all characters, and minus 15% upkeep for Reiksguard and Greatswords faction-wide. That's awesome. I don't think that was the case earlier, but I mean, that a faction-wide upkeep reduction of 15% is no joke. And then for his personal army, he has plus 8 leadership, which is pretty substantial.
Empire's blessings, yes.
Balthazar Gelt has plus 10 armor for all units faction-wide, which I believe used to be a Lord effect, but now it's a faction effect. He has +2 hero capacity for battle wizards, and minus 50% upkeep for battle wizards faction-wide. Once again, I don't know if these were all faction-wide. I think it may have just been the hero capacity, but that's a pretty substantial buff. For his personal lord effects, he has this super awesome one. Winds of Magic cost reduced by 20% for the Lore of Metal. That's pretty awesome and makes him pretty unique wizard-wise. No other wizard in the game has that, so that's a really cool buff. Then he has plus 10% missile damage for all artillery units in his personal army, and +2 ranks for battle wizards faction-wide, but it's only, I believe, if he's local. I'm not sure if that's... I mean, that could be if he joins, then faction-wide they all get +2. That way, if you recruit him as a lord, he also has this buff. So that's probably what it means by faction-wide. So if you have him as playable, then you get +2 recruit ranks to all wizards.
The instrument of Sigmar's will.
Volkmar got some pretty substantial buffs to his flagellant play. So he still has his 20% increased chance to find magic items, though that might be slightly buffed. But now he gives +2 recruitment ranks to all warrior priests faction-wide, which is very nice. Minus 30% upkeep for flagellants faction-wide, and plus 30% weapon strength for flagellants faction-wide. So that makes flagellants fantastic regardless of the army you put them in. Warrior priests are of course an excellent grab, and that I mean, plus 20 chance to find magic items is fantastic faction-wide. For his personal army, however, he has plus 30% casualty replenishment rate for flagellants, plus 14 melee defense for flagellants, and plus 12% physical resistance for flagellants. So the flagellants in his personal army, especially since he starts with the Tattersouls, they are beefy, which is great.
Retake the realms.
So Thorgrim Grudgebearer starts with a plus 20 diplomatic relation with all other dwarven factions, minus 25% cost to all military recruitment buildings faction-wide, minus 15% upkeep for all Longbeards and Hammerers faction-wide, and plus 3 recruitment rate for Hammerers faction-wide. Very, very powerful buffs. And then for his personal lord effects, his leadership size is 75% larger, and it also has plus 8 additional effect. Very, very solid.
Our enemies shall tremble.
Grombrindal had some pretty substantial and serious changes made to his character. So now, faction-wide, whenever a army from Grombrindal the White Dwarf uses the Underway stance, it has a plus 60% chance to avoid being captured or stopped. He also gives his entire faction plus 20% weapon strength whenever they're fighting against elves, which is huge and awesome. Then of course he has his Power of the Ancestor Gods bit. And then for his personal lord effect, he gives plus 10 leadership to all units in his army, and he has plus 50% reinforcement range. Fantastic.
Lord of the England.
Belegar Ironhammer, of course, has a additional debuff to his upkeep until he captures Carrick 8 Peaks. However, he has plus 10 leadership when involved in a siege. He, of course, has his Ancestor Heroes. For his Lord effects, he actually got some very nice buffs. So, first of all, he has the Siege Attacker trait, which is not new. But his attribute, Vanguard Deployment during underway battles, all armies faction-wide. That is... oh, that's a buff. It used to be just him, I think. But now it's all armies faction-wide. So, I don't know why they put that in Lord effects instead of faction effects, but whatever. So long as you have Belegar Ironhammer, all of your armies have Vanguard when fighting underground. And then, of course, this is a new buff that is very, very thematic and cool, which is that his personal army has plus 10 leadership when fighting against Greenskins and Skaven. Very nice.
To die in battle.
Ungrim Iron Fist, of course, has suitable climate of frozen. He has minus 75% construction cost for Slayers buildings faction-wide, minus 50% recruitment cost for Slayer units faction-wide, and plus 10% speed for all infantry faction-wide, which is everything except war machines and gyrocopters. For his personal lord effects, he has plus 10 melee attack for all Slayer units, minus 25% upkeep for all Slayer units, and plus 30% casualty replenishment for all Slayer units. Pretty awesome. Greenskins have had some pretty serious buffs.
One true gift.
So for Grimgore, he gives all armies faction-wide +1 fightiness, which is fantastic. He also gives plus 10% campaign movement range to all armies faction-wide, still fantastic, and minus 15% upkeep for all Black Orcs and Biggins units, which is huge faction-wide. Those are some serious buffs to the Greenskins as a faction. For his personal Lord effects, he gets plus 30% additional post-battle loot, and then he gets plus 12 leadership and plus 10 armor to all Black Orcs in his army. That is awesome. Azhag has probably had the most exciting changes I've seen so far. Well, besides the Beastmen, but we'll get to that. So Azhag provides a colossal plus 25% research rate to his faction. He also reduces the construction cost for settlement chains by 25% in all regions. So that's the core structure, but it's for minor and major settlements, which is insane. And he also reduces the construction time of settlement chain buildings by 1 faction-wide. So he's actually the best Greenskin Lord to go with now if you're interested in expanding very quickly and having like a large empire. He also gets plus 25 additional income from sacking faction-wide. Awesome. For his personal Lord effects, he has basically the exact same thing as Thorgrim. He has a 75% increased leadership size and plus 8 to his leadership aura. Really, really solid. Very, very solid.
Supreme ruler of 8 peaks.
So for Crooked Moon, Skarsnik, of course, cannot recruit orcs until he has reclaimed Carrick 8 Peaks. He has hero actions cost 50% less, but the heroes receive 100% additional experience from those actions. The upkeep and recruitment cost of all goblins faction-wide is reduced by 40%. And then for his Lord effects, he of course still has Lightning Strike, and then he has a new ability, which is that he has plus 14 charge bonus for Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, which is very bizarrely specific. I almost expected it to say just squigs, like regular squigs, and then of course Squig Hoppers, but nope, just Squig Hoppers. So Wurzag is truly the king of the Savage Orcs here. For faction-wide, he gives a minus 50% chance for enemy heroes to succeed in their actions. So if you really hate enemy agents, Wurzag is the lord for you. He also gives plus 25 to all Savage Orc units faction-wide. Very, very nice. For his personal army, he gives all Savage Orcs an additional 15% physical resist, putting them up to 40 starting off the campaign. He also has minus 50% upkeep and minus 50% recruitment for all Savage Orcs. So he is really just the king of Savage Orcs, which is just great.
I'll take Sigmar's throne.
So Manfred von Karstein starts with 1 Blood Kiss, as do the other vampire lords, Vlad and Isabella. He gives plus 10% campaign movement range to all characters faction-wide, minus 15% upkeep for all Graveguard and Black Knights faction-wide, which is awesome if you're into high-end armies. And then he has plus 2 recruitment ranks for Graveguard and Black Knights faction-wide, which is just awesome. I keep wanting to say Black Arcs because I'm tripping over my tongue. For Lord effects, he has plus 30 to his starting Winds of Magic Power Reserve and plus 10 leadership to his entire army when fighting against the Realms of Men, which I believe is new and is quite nice.
Death is only the beginning.
So, Helman Gorst. Oh boy. So, Gorst gives a plus 12 charge bonus to all corpse cards faction-wide. He gives plus 20% replenishment to all armies faction-wide, which is pretty good. He also gives plus 3 recruit ranks for all corpse cart units faction-wide, which is pretty powerful, especially since the Vampire Count's buildings have been rearranged a little bit, like the way they, which buildings give you which units. So that could have a pretty interesting effect. And then he has the highest research bonus in the game starting off at 30%. His only Lord effect is that all of the units in his army have poisoned attacks.
King of Darkness.
So, good old Vlad von Karstein here also starts with a Blood Kiss, and he also has plus 10% campaign movement range to all characters. Fantastic. For his Lord effects, he of course has Vanguard Deployment for his army only, has substantial melee attack and melee defense buffs when Isabella is reinforcing him, and has the Siege Attacker trait.
Countess of Sylvania.
Isabella von Karstein. Her faction effects are that she has plus 3 hero capacity for vampires, plus 25% weapon damage for all embedded vampire heroes, and then for her and that's faction wide. So all vampire heroes faction wide get that plus 25% weapon damage bonus. And then for her personal army, she also gives vampire heroes that join her plus 10 melee attack, melee defense, and of course has her Undying Love bonus with Vlad.
Find me grave bound.
Heinrich Himmler, who of course has been completely reworked as far as a faction is concerned with the Barrow Legion, considers mountains to be suitable climate. He has plus 30 relations with the Worshippers of Chaos, so he's very, very friendly with Beastmen, Norska, and Chaos when they show up eventually. He also has minus 50% upkeep for Necromancer heroes faction-wide, so it really is encouraging you to take those heroic Necromancers. For his Lord effects, he gives plus 2 recruitment ranks for Necromancers that are hired locally. He does not suffer from non-vampiric attrition, so as long as the attrition is only being caused by low vampiric corruption, he'll ignore it. And then of course he gets some corrupt.
To the four corners.
So Wulfric the Wanderer, for his faction, he gives plus 15 melee attack for all mammoth units in all armies, and also minus 15% upkeep for all marauder units faction wide. Fantastic. Then he has the Siege Attacker trait, and for his personal army, he has a 30% increased reinforcement range, just like Grombrindal, and all units in his army cause fear.
Lord of the Monster Hole.
So, good old Throg the Troll King here, faction-wide, has plus 15% physical resistance to all troll units and minus 20% upkeep to all troll units. So you should be definitely running an all-monstrous horde with all of your armies if you're not already. He then also has the Siege Attacker trait as a Lord effect. He also gives plus 1 public order, but only to the local province he's standing in. Everyone in his army is of course immune to all forms of attrition, and then he gives plus 2 chaos corruption to whatever province he's standing in.
King of Bretonia.
Bretonians have had some pretty interesting changes. So Lewin gives plus 10% campaign movement to all characters, plus 50% leadership aura size to all lords so long as they're attacking faction wide. So that it really lets you have truly brave and courageous generals leading all your armies with those huge leadership aura sizes, considering it's faction wide. For his personal effects, he has gotten a very thematic and badass upgrade, which is that he gives all units in his personal army plus 8 melee attack and plus 12 leadership whenever he's fighting against the forces of Chaos, Undead, or Greenskins. Very thematic, very cool.
My reputation precedes me.
Alberic has been considerably buffed. So for him, he has plus 25% income from trade, faction-wide, plus 2 recruitment rank to all Bretonian knight units, faction-wide, and minus 1 recruitment duration for Bretonian units, faction-wide. Those are huge buffs for faction-wide. So that means at minimum you're starting off with level 3 knights. And then for his personal army, he of course has the plus chivalry buff that they all have. And then he has plus 10 melee defense for all Knights of the Realm in his personal army. But yeah, these buffs to just being able... He's basically the Knight Lord. If you're wanting to just spam Knights, then Bordelot is probably for you.
Who wishes the grail?
So, the Fey Enchantress, she has faction-wide, greatly reduced upkeep for all Grail Guardians. She gets plus 5 peasant slots available to her faction. And she has plus 15% casualty replenishment faction-wide, which is the highest besides Gorst. Then for her lord effects, she personally causes fear. She has the Blessing of the Lady, just like Lewin does. And of course, some chivalry. The Wood Elves have also had some very substantial changes.
Protector of the Oak.
Orion received some pretty serious buffs. So for his faction, he still has the unique Wild Hunt event, which if you've never triggered, you should. It's very powerful. You get it through one of the offices. He also gives plus 10 leadership to all armies so long as they're fighting in a forest battle. And he has minus 20% upkeep for all cavalry units faction-wide. That is a pretty substantial buff. For his personal lord effects, he gives plus 20% weapon strength and plus 8 charge bonus to all Wild Rider units. Awesome. Very, very awesome. Durthu. Faction-wide, instead of leadership, he gives all of his armies in his entire faction plus 10 melee attack during forest battles. He also gives minus 50% recruitment cost for branch wraiths faction-wide. And then for his personal army, he has a whopping minus 30% upkeep for all forest spirits, plus 10 charge bonus for all forest spirits, and of course all of his all the units in his army are immune to attrition. Alright, Beastmen, who have had some beautiful changes, as have the Warriors of Chaos. Khazrak the One-Eye now gives plus 10 leadership to all armies who are fighting against humans. So that's not just Khazrak, that's everybody. He also gives plus 40% income from raiding for all armies faction-wide. Holy crap. He also gives plus 10 charge bonus faction-wide for Bestigor herds. And you think that's crazy? Look at this. For his personal effects, he gets minus 30% upkeep, minus 50% recruitment cost, plus 3 recruitment ranks, and minus 1 recruitment duration for Bestigors. So he's going to be able to recruit Bestigors, I believe, in a single turn at plus 3 ranks, minus 50% cost, and minus 30% upkeep. That is insane. This dude is designed to just be running assloads of Bestigors. But the faction effects for him are very, very powerful and really reward you for just taking on Tilia, Estalia, the Border Princes, Bretonia, and the Empire. And, you know, going south beyond there if you want. Really, really cool buffs. So Maligore the Dark Omen has also seen some pretty substantial buffs. Well, all of them have. So he gives plus 10% campaign movement to all armies. He gives plus 2 recruitment capacity for Bray Shamans. And then here's the big one. Plus 2 horde growth to all armies. So if you're wanting to run a ton of Beastmen herds, Maligore is definitely the way to go. And he also gives you plus 20 relations with Beastmen war herds. Which, I mean, I don't think this was in the last build, but I feel like a ton of characters have these really huge starting bonuses with various races, and I really, really like this. I mean, one of the biggest complaints I have about Total War Warhammer right now is that confederating with minor factions is such a huge pain in the ass, and even just simply establishing a good relationship with someone who should be your friend, you know, like a non-aggression pact, can be really difficult. So I'm glad to see so many lords are starting off with somewhere between plus 10 and plus 30 diplomatic relations with the appropriate factions. So for his lord effects, Maligore has some terrifying lord effects. He has minus 8 leadership to all local enemy armies and minus 8 casualty replenishment for all local enemy armies, which is just devastating. And then of course he has plus 3 recruit rank for Bray Shamans that are recruited from his herd. I'm pretty sure last I checked on Maligore, I think last build all he had was the Bray Shaman buff, and that was like it. So these are huge and beautiful buffs. So Morgur the Shadowgave, he gives plus 3 Chaos Corruption to all characters faction-wide, so if you just want to melt everybody, this is the way to go. But as a faction bonus now, he has plus 30% upkeep for all Minotaur units, but minus 60% upkeep for all Chaos Spawn units. So if you really like Minotaurs, probably shouldn't take Morgur, because it's a faction-wide debuff. But if you like Chaos Spawn, then hoo boy. For his Lord effects, he gives plus 20% missile resistance to all Chaos Spawn in his army, plus 12% casualties suffered from Chaos territory attrition to all local enemy armies. So if you raise a settlement to raise the Chaos corruption and people start taking damage, as long as Morgar's around, they take a ton of damage. He of course has retained his ability where he only remains wounded for a single turn, and then he gives an additional plus 8 melee attack to all Chaos Spawn in his army, making them into true powerhouses.
Tyrion's eye guides me.
So for Archon the Everchosen, all three of these clowns have gotten pretty hilarious buffs. So Archon, faction-wide, gives plus 10 leadership and minus 30% recruitment cost for Chaos Warriors. So really, really solid. If you really like Chaos Warriors and just want to run lots of armor plating, Archon is the man for you. He does, of course, suffer the minus 30 diplomatic relations with all factions, however, as he is the doom of the world. However, for his personal army, he has these two amazing buffs. First of all, he gives plus 50% income from raising settlements, and he starts with a 5% ward save for all units in his army. That is insane. 5% ward save. So that just means that every single unit character that joins Archon's personal army has a just has a 5%, just ignores 5% of all damage. Awesome. Very, very awesome.
Tempest incarnate.
So for Kolak Sun-Eater, he gives a huge plus 4 Chaos Corruption to all characters in his faction. So if you really like just spreading Chaos Corruption and watching the world turn to ash and cinder, Kolak is definitely the way to go, especially if you want to like pave the road ahead of you. He also gives minus 60% recruitment cost for Dragon Ogre units faction-wide. So you can have multiple hordes that will very cheaply get new Dragon Ogres. However, as a punishment for this, all hordes in Kolak Sun-Eater's faction have a minus 20% chance to detect ambush. So if you take him, you're more likely to get ambushed with all of your armies. But honestly, being able to just corrupt everything and get super cheap Dragon Ogres, that seems like a fine trade. For his personal Lord effects, he has minus 30% upkeep for all Dragon Ogre units in his army, and then plus 10 melee attack for all Dragon Ogre Shaggots in his army. And last, but certainly not least, is Sig Bald the Magnificent. So Sig Bald, faction-wide, gives plus 15 leadership, which is the highest I've seen, when fighting against the realms of men. He also has a plus 20 diplomatic relation with all Norscan tribes, and all lords and all heroes in his entire faction have plus 15 armor. That is huge. That makes them hilariously tanky. Then for his Lord effects, he has plus 3 horde growth for his personal army, minus 60% upkeep for all Chaos Marauder units, and plus 3 recruitment rank for all Marauder units. So Sig Bald is really able to start off really strong. Like, he's actually, most people I know who play Warriors of Chaos, because you start with a Marauder building most of the time, they tend to disband it immediately, like break it down and build something else. Sig Bald, it's actually worth keeping, because, I mean, if you're starting off recruiting rank 4 units that you're only paying 40% of their upkeep, while your horde grows faster than any other Chaos army, that's nothing to shirk at, especially since he starts off with 2 units of Chosen and a frickin' Hell Cannon. But that will do it for this selection. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We did it on stream, and a lot of people were like, holy crap, because there were some substantial changes. So I would love to know down in the comment section below which change you're the most excited about, and if there's any one of them that you're surprised about or super excited or what have you. In any event, thank you all for watching. I will be back, of course, with more videos all over the place, and we will be doing some more Mortal Empires with good old Noctilus later today. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.